Puerto Rican quattro. This is the national instrument of Puerto Rico. First thing to get out of the way is probably the name, because as Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs taught me, quattro means four, and these instruments have 5 courses of 2 strings, making 10 in total. That's not 4. The name is actually a holdover from an archaic version of this instrument that really only did have 4 strings, like a ukulele, which was itself probably a simplification of Spanish Renaissance vihuela poblana, which had 4 courses of strings. That was back in the 16th century. These have been on the island for a very long time. It's kind of a funky shape, huh? This is known as the aviolinado pattern, which is the modern standard. Earlier ones had more of a boxy shape in the upper bout. They look kind of like, an old-fashioned keyhole or something. These instruments were part of an ensemble culture, usually quartets or quintets with other stringed instruments of different sizes to give all the various voices from bass to soprano. And it was used in a bunch of different folk dance and song idioms, genres. As new musical styles came up, it sort of blended right in with whatever was fashionable at the time, all the way through salsa into modern Puerto Rican pop music too. This is a humble example. I'm assuming it's from the 60s or 70s based on the case. That's pretty cool. And this, friends, is an actual luggage claim ticket from Pan Am Airlines, Brussels. So this is well traveled. So this badly needs a setup. It's missing 2 strings, and well, it could be kind of tricky because this massive bridge here seems to be disintegrating around the saddle slot, which is at the very front of the bridge. The saddle itself has taken on a kind of sway-backed sort of configuration. I don't know if this coloring in the wood was original. It may have been used as a paddle at some point. That could be actual black mold that has infiltrated under the finish. What's that mold? I'm to do what? All of them? Really? Whatever you say, mold. Transplanting an instrument like this from its birthplace in sort of a tropical area with no humidity control into the heart of a Canadian winter, it has left it with some vicious fret sprout. It's just like a cheese grater. The action on this is pretty stiff. Not really sure where to measure it. It's got 9 frets to the body. Well, let's do the 12th anyway. It's in the range of about 9/64ths on the bass side. And here on the second course it's like 7/64ths. Small gauge strings like this, I think we should probably want about half that. Unfortunately, I think at some point someone has just used portions of a 12-string set to restring it, and that's not really what it wants. I mean, silk and steel basses, likely. Quite a lot of tension on here, and straight edge on the frets runs quite a ways below the top surface of the bridge here. I think probably my best bet is just to plug what's left of this saddle slot here. And I'm likely going to be planing down a portion of this as well so that I can have enough clearance to actually put a saddle in there and have some break angle. Break angle is not bad in this case. There's room for me to come down quite a ways if I plane this front surface down some. As for the wood in this, I'm not exactly sure what this top wood is made of. In the exuberant shape, these are not bent. These are sawn from actual 2.5-inch planks of mahogany. The backboard is what we call Spanish cedar, what the Spanish call cedrela, just South American kind of cedar, kind of mahogany-esque wood, often used in classical guitar necks. The neck is Honduras mahogany. The fretboard, not sure what it is. It's been lacquered over though. It's about 256.5 millimeters to the middle of the 12th fret, which would be 513, just over 20 inches. Quick look inside. We have longitudinal braces that are quite massive, and you can see the bridge was bolted in place under a veneer cap on the tie block, sort of like a Gibson. I'm still not sure if this species of Stachybotrys was incipient spalting when the wood was harvested, or if it took up residence after construction. In any case, it adds a delicious spicy flavor and a mouthfeel. And this is not Spanish heel construction. There is a separate neck block. We don't know if there's a dovetail or a straight tenon in there. That is cut, I think, from a string packet, a D'Addario, from the 1970s. Appreciate with me how deformed that front edge of the bridge has become. Yeah, this slot is very irregular. This little bent chisel I made from, it's actually a checkering file for doing gun stock checkering. It's got this little dog leg in it that helps. Is it a dog leg or a gooseneck? I think it's kind of goosey. We'll call it a gooseneck. That's nice. I seem to have the right species and color of wood. It's pairing time. Recently, Adam, Savage that is, was talking about my big chisels and that I inspired him to get one, and I was like, I have not really thought about this all that much, but I guess it's true. If I'm paring something down, I usually pick up a large chisel, even when the thing to be pared is comparatively tiny. The most used in my collection is this 1-inch width, 25 millimeters, but I also frequently use this 1.5-inch monster, which is 38 millimeters. The analogy to me, it's like a tightrope walker who carries a long pole, you know. It helps balance. And it also helps to gauge when things are getting out of level. Also, the sheer mass of steel behind the cut helps, you know. It doesn't want to chatter. It's very controllable. And, you know, I have tiny chisels too, of course. Here's one that I made that's like 1.5 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch, but this is not the tool to use in this case. I'm marking a point just above the level of the string holes in the tie block, which is about 10 millimeters above the soundboard, as it turns out. This will ensure that there's some break angle over the saddle, and it will be as low as it can go. So I'll plane down to there. I'll make the saddle surface area flat because I'm going to be using a blind saddle slot this time. And also, there was no compensation factor in the original saddle placement. It was the exact scale length. It needs to move about 1.5 millimeters away from the headstock. I'll pare away what remains of the plug. And I'll fill any little crevices along the plug with some super glue and sanding dust. I'll mark the saddle position. For a repair person thinking about building a saddle slot routing jig like this, it pays to think ahead, because it's not always going to be a standard Martin size bridge. Some of the ones from the 60s and 70s, like on Epiphone, Gibson 12 strings from that era, they can be gargantuan. So give yourself some room. This is like 7.5 inches long. It should be about 190 millimeters by like 1 3/4 wide. And even that is not quite enough to do a couple of, you know, really bizarro bridges I've seen. This is an interesting situation I don't encounter very often, because this bridge is exceptionally tall. This tie block is like 13 millimeters, more than 1/2 inch off the top. Ordinarily you'd expected to see maybe 3/8 of an inch, like 10 millimeters. So when I've got my router set up, it wants to ride on top of the bridge rather than the landing areas on either side. So I'm going to probably take my adjustment strip here, which I normally use to dial in the depth that I want to cut. I rest the router on here and then lower the bit until it touches the top surface of the bridge. In this case, I'm going to double stick tape this to the bottom of my router, and that should give me, enough security when I'm routing the slot. Ah, a Gretsch Electromatic. I have to say, if I didn't have an electric guitar, which I don't, and I was to go out and purchase a new one, there would be a pretty strong case for it to be an Electromatic. I've liked every one of these that I've played and worked on in a bunch of different styles. This one looks like a duo jet. There's not a whole lot of information online about the history of these. I think they started being produced around 2005. This iteration of them, which is shortly after Fender purchased Gretsch. I like the American produced models too, of course, but these things pack a whole lot of wallop for the price, In my experience, the fret ends tend to be a little sharp after the first Canadian winter, but the fit and finish are right up there. This one was having a switch issue, a switch-u. Professional player doing regular gigs. No time for fooling around, does not want it to happen again, even though right now it seems to be functioning kind of. I've been told to put a new Switchcraft in there. Switchcraft switches, which are the ones that are used in the American models, incidentally, they are way, way more expensive than the Asian imports. This is made in Chicago, and yeah, they're pretty bulletproof. Some slight modifications might be necessary. I have no idea. Why will that not come off? There isn't like a set screw or something, is there? I don't see one. Well, we'll make it come off if necessary. Whether that's going to be a metric thread or whatever's on here, we'll see. I just know that the tip alone costs about 20 bucks. So if we can get away with not having to purchase one, that would be a good thing. Why use a wrench when you have a grip of steel? I think this was made in 2018, if I'm reading the serial number correctly. The plastic has not been removed. Close quarters. Shiny guitar. Let's try to keep it from getting burned up. There isn't an extra millimeters worth of wire, so I'm doing everything inside the electronics cavity here. I've got the solder sucker. There's quite a lot of solder on some of these, so I'll do my best to clear that off before I try to pull the wires. The metal frame on a switch actually represents quite a lot of metal. It takes a while to heat up, so I use a fairly large soldering iron for this, a 40 watt. Need the extra power. So I decided to go out and get an actual Gretsch switch. This is for the US guitars. It is made by Switchcraft. And there are some slight differences from the typical Asian import switch. Usually these are, you can tell because they've got this rather dark brown insulating material, but also the orientation of the contact points is usually a little bit different from what you'll find in the US made ones. Like they'll have the grounding lug will be on the opposite side of the frame, for instance. So you have to be careful when you're taking them apart to sort of, maybe take a picture to make sure you know which way things are oriented and where certain wires go. But looking at this Gretsch one, it's maybe a little different from some I've seen in that they've got one single breaker on this side that has like a doubled up pair of leaves, and on the other side you have contact points which are closed and then opened, so you have 3 leaves in a row. That's a little different. Usually you'll have like a pair of leaves on either side of the switch body, so that pulling at one side will open one and the other. In this case, they're all on one side. That's interesting. Here's the standard switchcraft model. You can see it functions more like the import. Throwing the switch to one side breaks the contact. And when it's straight up and down, current is running through both contacts at the same time. So I'll get that wired up. The thing to look for is a nice shiny pool of solder. When it's cooled, it should look very mirror-like. Okay, just testing this out. This is obviously not the right switch. I think this is a Gretsch switch designed for a tone circuit that has an on-off-on function, because this center position does not give me both pickups, which is kind of infuriating. So I guess I got to do a switcheroo and switch out this switch for another switch. It's useful to have one of these contraptions. This is as far as I can pull the harness out, remember? There's very little slack. We'll tighten that up. Okay, a couple things. Number one, you'll note that USA made switchcraft jacks, even the ones that are listed in various guitar catalogs as chrome, they're nickel. Like, they're not that white-blue chrome that you'll get from, Gretsch, Asian-made product. It's very definitely nickel, so it's slightly warmer in tone. Just going to have to live with it. The other thing is the switch tip here does not fit. This has an 832 thread. By luck, though, I think the import ones have a bore on them which is significantly smaller, to the point where I can drill this out and tap it for 832, thus saving us like $24 or whatever it is for this little part. This is a tap or a thread cutter. The thing to remember with these is that you want to advance and then retreat slightly so that there's room for the chip to break off and get expelled. So you go a full turn around and then back around half a turn or so. Some nice interior threads, but not threaded far enough because the taps I own are designed to go through material. They have this conical end. So I'll lop the tapered portion off, creating what's known as a bottoming tap. Now we encounter the fact that the threaded portion on the USA made part is about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters longer than the import, which means there's no way I'm going to get enough threads into that particular tip, which means I've actually got to cut this one down. Yeah, would much prefer to do this with the part off the guitar, but I'm not unsoldering that thing a third time. Ow. Don't rest the heel of your hand on the freshly cut part. Ease the freshly cut edge so that it won't have problems starting in the threads. So smooth. Back to this, made a properly fitting saddle blank. I'll seal the freshly cut surface with a couple of coats of shellac. I'll scrape off these fragments of house paint / seagull doo-doo. I'll tint the still lighter colored areas with a marker. Give it some yellow. To get a preliminary saddle height, I'll scribe the top of the bridge and then mark a line about 3 millimeters above that. I'll cut it off. There's considerable grunge on these frets, which need polishing and polishing and polishing. I'll make the ends of the frets more uniform. And get rid of the pokey pokies. Rounding the corners. And of course some of the nut slots were a little bit too high. Alright friends, this is one of those that's always going to tug at me a little bit because I see the potential, but this is the rational stopping place. In order to make this play the way I want it would require a $500 repair on like a $200 instrument. I've reduced the action as far as it can go and maintained sufficient brake angle over the saddle, which yields us 6/64 on the bass side, a little under 5 on the treble. But that's not the biggest concern. This short little neck here with only 9 frets has 18 thousandths relief in it at the 5th fret. Way too much. It makes it very stiff. The remedy would be to pull all of the frets and dress that out, focusing on the nut side of things, which would in effect tip the angle up. It would feel much better, we'd have better action, but the economics don't make sense for that. The thing is, I like this sound. I can't play Puerto Rican music, but with this tuning, which is in fourths, it's B, E, A, D, G, feels very Celtic to me, kind of droney. It's good.